let's talk about tips for decreasing fat intake on a carnivore diet. Hi, I'm Jen, and if you're new here, I am delighted to meet you. I did a video previously on how to increase fat intake on a carnivore diet, and that seems to be the question that most people have. But some people actually want to decrease fat on their carnivore diet. In fact, that's a change that I've made recently because I found that the less fat I eat, the more weight I lose. So if you're finding yourself in that same boat, here are some tips that might help. Tip number 1 is to cut down on the amount of fat that you're using to prepare your meals. So in the past, I used a lot of butter or tallow or bacon grease to cook my meat in or my eggs in, but you really don't need that. Those things are fatty enough on their own that they typically don't stick to what you're cooking them on. So just keep that in mind, that you don't have to add any extra fat when cooking. If you do want to add some fat and you want it to be carnivore friendly, something like a duck fat spray might be a little bit better because you won't use near as much of it. Tip number 2 is to replace some of your egg yolks with extra egg whites when preparing egg dishes. Now, I love the egg yolks myself, so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you shouldn't eat egg yolks. But if you're trying to decrease your fat and you want to make a scrambled egg breakfast with, let's say, 8 eggs in it, maybe do 6 with just the whole egg and 2 with just the egg white. Little changes like that add up and will decrease the amount of fat that you consume in a day. My third tip is just don't add fat to your meals or your drinks. So many people are having things like coffee in the morning with egg yolks or butter or heavy cream. That's a really easy place to start to eliminate some fat. Don't drink your fat. That will help cut out a lot of it. And in the past, I've done a lot with adding fat trimmings to my meals. I serve it alongside of meats and I love it. It's so delicious. But when you're trying to cut down on fat, that is the easiest place to decrease. Just choose fatty meats that are naturally fatty themselves and don't add any extra fat, and that will go a long way. Another simple switch that you may not even notice is to change the proportions of your ground beef. So for example, if you're currently purchasing 80-20 ground beef, that means that 80% of what's in there is the lean meat and 20% is fat, and they grind it all up together. But if you purchase, let's say 85-15 ground beef, that's automatically gonna have significantly less fat in it because it started out with less fat in the ground meat. If you use that ground beef to make something like beef patties, you honestly may hardly even notice the difference, but you're getting less fat without even knowing it. Along those same lines, my next tip is to purchase leaner cuts of meat. So if you're currently buying a lot of fatty meats like ribeyes and T-bones and short ribs, consider replacing some of those meals with leaner cuts like sirloin or roasts. Another example that's very appropriate for me is I really love to make beef jerky, and I usually make it with brisket, and it seems like it's about 50% meat, 50% fat, and I love it. But when I buy something like a top round or bottom round to make the jerky, it is obviously much, much less fatty, higher in protein, and that helps me to cut down on fat. Tip number 6 is to include some seafood. Fish like salmon and things like that are very high in healthy fats like omega-3s, but they're still way lower in fat than a fatty piece of red meat. So if you would like to include some whitefish or some salmon or even shrimp or lobster or crab, any of those things are going to be lower in fat than a fatty steak, for example. So include some seafood a few meals a week, and that's going to help a lot. And my last tip is a very sad one. You can take this one or leave it. I don't know if I would do it. But if you remove the skin from your chicken, that will cut down quite a bit on your fat intake. Of course, it's the most delicious part in my opinion, so I'm not sure if I could bring myself to do it. But it is a practical way that you could decrease fat in your diet if you choose. I hope you found this helpful if you're trying to decrease fat on a carnivore diet. And if you are, please let me know in the comments why you're doing that and how you feel. I'd love for you to like this video and subscribe, and check me out on Instagram. I'm active there daily, often multiple times a day, and we can definitely connect there and really get to know each other.